and welcome to the 28th Annual HP Lovecraft Film Festival. This is our streaming edition. We hope you've enjoyed all the films you've seen so far. There's one film you're not going to see in the streaming edition, but that's Suitable Flesh, which we gave our Best Feature Award to, and it also won the Audience Choice Award in the theater in Portland. Yeah. So we're here to talk with some of the creators of the film. We've got, well, I guess we don't know. Well, no, we do know. This is how it'll show up. So in your upper right, we have Dennis Paoli, the writer of Suitable Flesh. Yeah, he's got one of the awards. And he also wrote Reanimator, From Beyond, Castle Freak, and about 3,000 other films that you've heard of. Going clockwise, we've got Barbara Crampton, who starred in some of those same films and is now producing films in the, what are we saying, the Miskatonic verse? Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And down in your lower left is Joe Lynch, the director of Suitable Flesh. You may also remember him from Knights of Badassdom. Yeah.
Really, that's the only one that you bring up of all movies? That's like and Dennis Paoli, the writer of Ghoulies 3.
Ghoulies 2. Ghoulies 2.
Ghoulies 2.
Ghoulies.
What's your favorite movie, Joe Lynch, that you directed?
That I directed? I mean, I would go with, I tend to go with the personal ones, like the ones that affected me, like, or that I had the most, I guess, influence on from a personal side. And it used to be Mayhem.
Yeah.
But now I'm seeing that Suitable Flesh is like, now that I can step back from the mechanics of it and the machine of it and kind of reflect on it a little bit more, I kind of feel like Suitable Flesh is my favorite of my films. I'm not just saying that, guys. I swear, I'm not just saying that for all of you. But yeah, I would go with that. But if you had to mention another movie, go with like Mayhem or Everly or Wrong Turn 2, Point Blank. Knights of Badassdom. Yeah, but you know what? The one thing that I can say that all of us can agree with is with cinema, it is so subjective because like we made this movie when we all sat down and said, this is the type of movie that we want to make. We wanted to attack it from a very, not, I hate to use the word niche, but we had a very direct voice, and that started on the page and that carried on into the development and the production of it. And then when I was brought aboard, to kind of like take the baton and run with it, we all agreed that we wanted to not just, make this a love letter to our friend Stuart Gordon, but also make something that would be truthful to Lovecraft and all the influences that we wanted to make. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that it's a 4-quadrant movie. Like that was something that we all knew we weren't. If we tried to make a movie for everyone, we were going to end up making a movie for no one. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to hone in on a very specific audience, and then hopefully, based on the quality, based on the stars that we have involved, that would hopefully allow the film to breathe a new life. But for us, this was a very personal film for me, and I know it was for Dennis, and I know it was for Barbara. So knowing how personal that was, we didn't want to homogenize it at all by going like, what are the kids going to think? What's the 18 to 24 demo going to think? What's the, social justice warrior demo going to think? If we tried to make a movie for them, we probably wouldn't be talking right now.
Well, that leads us into one of the questions we had. So this film, for people that we're always surprised when people don't know about this film or haven't heard about it. But for those of you that don't know about it, it is based on H.P. Lovecraft's short story, The Thing on the Doorstep, which I think of as one of Lovecraft's more modern stories. There's because there's a lot of films where he really harkens back to earlier ages, but this one has guns and car rides and sanitariums and institutions.
Got a woman. It's got a woman in it.
And it's got a woman in it. Which,
progressive.
Which rare for him.
Yeah, exactly. Although, not the woman that we have in our version.
That's right.
Rewritten.
There's a few more. There's a few more in this one. And Suitable Flesh is based in today. It takes place today. But the filmmaking has a lot of sort of, I would say, film noir, neo-noir touches. Reminds me of things like Body Double and what, the Long Kiss Goodnight, or I'm forgetting the names, but do you want to talk a little bit about your approach to actually making the film, like the way it looked and the way it felt from that perspective?
You know, I'm an a lover of cinema. I am a connoisseur of cinema. Cinema has been so much a part of my DNA for my entire life, since my mom took me to go see Dawn of the Dead when I was 2. That was pretty much the impetus for my obsession with cinema. I would say that I am literally obsessed with cinema. And when this idea came to me from Dennis and Barbara, not only did I had to read it in like uh, multiple mental dimensions. One, I had to read it as how can I adapt an H.P. Lovecraft story based on, and a very modernized one too. Secondly, how can I pay tribute to one of my heroes, Stuart Gordon, who paved the way for me to even read Lovecraft? He was the hand that held me into the world of Lovecraft, like so many fans that grew up, being exposed to Reanimator and From Beyond and Dagon. But also in reading the story, and this was even before we started bouncing around the idea of gender swapping. This felt very much like those old erotic film neo noirs from not just the 90s, but even going further back into like the 40s and 50s, all the old Joseph Lewis stuff. Like there's one called Gun Crazy that came out back in the 40s that was very much an influence on this film. There was something about the noir aspect of the femme fatale, the hapless protagonist that gets thrust into a situation, the doting wife, or in this case husband. There were all of these tropes that, whether or not Dennis was aware of it at the time when he was writing it, which I'm going to say he was, taking the adaptation of Lovecraft and putting it into modern worlds, it ultimately allowed us to look at a lot of those neo noir films, especially in the 90s. There was, the Paul Verhoeven films like Basic Instinct and John Dahl with The Last Seduction, anything Brian De Palma circa 1979 into like 1993 with Raising Cain. All of these films had that perfect balance of dread and atmosphere and seduction. There was an eroticism to it that it was so easy for me to get excited about making this movie because I love all of those movies. And what was even more exciting was the fact that the marketplace, sorry to sound all industry, but the marketplace was kind of dry from this, this subgenre, like in right now in this culture, there's not a lot of those neo noir films. There's not a lot of those erotic thrillers. Now that's not to say that people don't want them. It's just, like when you make a movie, there is a 2 to 3 year gap between the first word that's put on page and then when it then when it finally comes out. So that workflow allows you to kind of reflect on trends. And right now, there wasn't a lot of those movies. So if anything, it felt dangerous. And I love making something that's a little, dangerous and a little provocative. So that to me was like, these are the types of movies that I would be really excited to watch. And therefore, it's the kind of movie that I want to make. And I get to have my cake and eat it too, because not only do I get to make an erotic thriller, but I also get to do it in the world of Lovecraft and in the world that Stuart Gordon and Dennis and Brian and Barbara had established way back in the 80s with Reanimator by putting it into the Miskatonic verse. So that's why when I said before, like this is one of my, if not my favorite movie, but if I could go back in time and tell myself at 10 that I would have the opportunity to make this type of movie, first off, I go, get away from me, old man. But then secondly, I would say, this is exactly the kind of movie that I've always wanted to make. So that's really where I got inspired the second that I started reading Dennis's script.
Yeah, we wanted to homage Stuart Gordon, but at the same time, I do feel like, he was also a very dangerous filmmaker, and you are as well. So you guys shared that. And I think your personality about the material is very similar to Stuart. I always thought you were the best choice. And but I remember saying to you, right before we were shooting, I said, this may have been a Stuart Gordon project, but this is now a Joe Lynch film. So you have to make it your own. And I think some of those erotic thriller aspects probably wasn't something, even though Stewart had, some sexuality. Dennis, you have that, in some of your writing. I don't think he would have veered towards that aspect of it as much as you did.
Although I'm glad you did. And I'm not, yeah, it's hard to say. Stewart was taken with the story. We were taken with the story, was one of our favorite Lovecraft stories from the jump. And we had wanted to adapt it in one way or another from the mid late 90s on. And Stewart loved the script that I did, and he was adamant about saving the sensuality and the sexuality in the story. He thought it was there. It's a mind swapping story. It's a body swapping story. It's a mind swapping story. It's a gender swapping story, the original story itself. But that's the sexiest stuff in the world. The minds. What's the sexiest organ? The mind. Well,
Well, that was from Beyond as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, if there is a Miskatonic verse, that was, this fits exactly into that.
Yeah.
And it pulls some levers and it touches some buttons that are there in a number of Lovecraft stories. It hits a number of themes that are there in a number. They might be submerged underneath some very thick language, but once you put them on the screen, you see what's going on in Lovecraft. And Joe saw it, and Joe shows us. Joe, it's first-rate stuff.
And one of the things that we actually, when Dennis first sent me the script, because Stewart had passed away, and then Dennis and I are connected, but we kind of reconnected over Stewart's death, and we were chatting, and then I said, well, what do you have laying on your shelf that you guys never did? And then he sent me this, and I immediately loved it. And I said, oh my God, we have to make this. Let me try and see if I can, get this done. We weren't thinking, there was one aspect of the material that we weren't really thinking of, but it took us almost, 2 years to get into production. Something that happened was there's a lot of questions around gender identity in our culture and in our politics over the last couple of years. And then we went, oh, well, this body swapping entity is going between male and female, and then thinking female's kind of cool. And, that would have worked at any time period, but we didn't hit it over the head. And some reviews have come out and talked about it, but it's layered in there, but it's not something so overt. But it definitely is in the cultural lexicon right now about, what is gender and what is identity? And, some people identify as everything. And what is that? And so I think that was also very timely for us, as part of the story.
And
I will say though, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. It's just very Lovecraft too. We terrified him. That idea that, and Lovecraft was fearless about showing us what terrified him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, to be totally honest, if the script had come to me, and we've talked about this before, like back in the 90s, I don't think we would have approached the idea of initially swapping the genders, because just the body politic of the industry at the time, say again 15 years ago, was a little more male skewed. And I think, we've always joked like this would be a perfect vehicle for Michael Douglas back in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
But now, things have changed. Things have progressed in the best way. Things have evolved or even mutated. And the opportunity for us to even have the idea when Dennis and Barbara first sent the script to start out with our base gender being female, that just opened up so many possibilities to be much more subversive instead of like Barbara saying, we wanted to layer it in. We didn't want to bang the audience over the head with it, but the best way to do it without, again, somebody coming up to us and saying like, oh, that's so misogynistic, was to kind of revert it and kind of throw it back at their face and say, but would it be sexist if it was a female? So like some of the critics that we've had about the film have said like, just the fact that you're doing this body swapping is a tantamount to sexual abuse or even rape. And we're like, yeah, but are you seeing that from a male, a point of view, a male gaze or a female gaze? And for us being able to swap the genders, it just added so many more possibilities. And it actually, for me, it felt like we were asking the audience to invest in their own identities more. Because at the end of the day, no matter what, whether you're, like a casual viewer or you're very much a Lovecraftian devotee, I think what Lovecraft was trying to do, exactly what Dennis said, was he was trying to instill his own fears and expel them onto the audience, whether they're the readers or the viewers or what have you, even though I don't think he was worried about cinema at the time. But
Yeah.
that, like, by doing that, it allowed the audience to project themselves into, if anything, like the reader, and in this case now the viewer, they are now body swapping into our characters in a way.
There
So
was one
that's why when
There was one line from the movie that I love. Are you everything you thought you would become when you were born?
Mhm.
And that's like wherever you stand on these issues, there's a thoughtful response to that in your brain, for everyone.
And once you start down that road, I mean, consider if you identified at any point in the film with Judah Lewis, with his performance, he ends up playing both genders and four different identities. So if you identified with him, you were lost.
Yeah.
You lost your own identity.
Yeah.
And that was sort of, and that's the fear. That's the foundational fear. And we owe that to Lovecraft. Whether you switch those, switching those genres of the main characters in the story, as Joe suggested, allowed us to see it fresh. Allowed us, it freshened the story. As Barbara said, it made it speak to the language of the issue contemporarily. And not only that, it was fun. It made it more fun, I think.
That's one of the things that, we can talk heady stuff about, the script and the characters and how we all approached our work in it. But at the end of the day, also, something that both you and Stuart have, Joe, is that you want to make fun movies. And this is a fun movie. It's a ride,
Yeah.
And even if you don't identify with whatever the subject matter is, as far as, male, female, whatever, it's just, it's a thrill ride of a movie, I think.
Yeah, that was definitely the goal, and that was something that I got from Reanimator and from Beyond, and even some of Stuart's films like King of the Ants and Stuck. Stuart, on a front level, he is, and this is where I think his theatrical experience comes from. He wants the audience reaction, so he wants to take you on a ride. Like, since the movie's come out, I've had a couple of people say like, "Oh, the movie's really fun," and someone asked me, "It's like, is that like the right response?" I'm like, yes, it is. Like, I want the audience on a surface level to have a blast, go on this roller coaster ride. If they see something more than that, great. But if they go on this ride, exactly. Well, that was the whole point. Like, as long as if we can have some sugar to make the medicine go down,
Right.
take them on this ride and entertain them. And if at the end of the day, when they walk out of the theater, they push end on the screener, and they go, "Huh, wow, I didn't even think about that," and they can kind of delve deeper into the layers. That's exactly what I got from Lovecraft, and that's exactly what I got from Stuart Gordon movies. And if you got that, then we did our job.
I don't think people don't think of Lovecraft as fun because it's so creepy, it's so atmospheric, it's so, but creepy and atmospheric is fun. It's why
I
people
think so.
go to haunted houses, in October. There is a Lovecraft ride. It might get very dark at certain points. It might get very upsetting and troubling at other points, but it's a ride. Well, reading Lovecraft is you're getting in a car, you're strapping in, and you're gone, and you can't get out once you're in. So I mean, I don't think we give Lovecraft enough credit for being as entertaining as he is.
Yeah, I agree.
he was published in Weird Tales, which is essentially a pulp magazine, which was filled with things from, Robert E. Howard, and the
Adventure
covers were
stories.
lurid with like alien women with big boobs hanging out, and just fantastical things. So this was a magazine for people who wanted like escape and adventure, and it did
And
something.
he was a funny guy too. I mean, Reanimator.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
1,000 laughs. The guy was just he was, a laugh riot.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
you read
Person.
Lovecraft and you can't stop giggling. It's like amazing.
But I think, I think this isn't meant, the film's not meant to be Schindler's List, right? It's not meant to leave you on this like dreary, horrible, thing, right? It's meant to kind of, it's fun. There's gore and blood and laughs, and but it's okay also, I think, to elevate it and talk about, how this becomes in 2023 a really good discourse on things like trans rights or gender identification, as well as bodily autonomy,
and consent.
Yep.
Which some of us view as eroding rights, that we've got. So I think it's okay. I think it's okay to talk about it both ways,
Sure.
Yeah.
But I would never want anyone, because like we're now at like the time of this recording, we're in award season where everybody starts putting out those important films, those issue films, those films that will likely get a lot of awards. Honestly, the best award that we could get was the 2 awards that we got from you guys, because that means that we've validated ourselves for the fans of Lovecraft, to you guys, like to the people that we were making this film for. We were not looking to I don't know if you guys remember this, but Keenan Ivory Wayans used to do this thing in some of his films where he would, like, in the middle of a scene, he'd be off in the corner and then he would just go, message, and like in a pivotal point. We were not trying to do that, but what was exciting about like making this film was being able to slip in a lot of those themes that you were talking about, things that, like, when you asked me, like when we were talking before about my favorite film being my most personal film, even myself personally, I think all of us, especially in this day and age, are challenging the old-fashioned ideals of what gender identity, consent, sexual fluidity, all of these things have been brought to the forte to allow the audience to go, well, what am I? And that there's nothing wrong with that. But again, if we can entertain them and bring them along on this, this kind of wild adventure, even with, not to spoil anything, even with, this somewhat bleak climax that we leave you with. I like you said with Schindler's List, when I remember seeing Schindler's List in the theater opening day, and when the movie was over, everyone just kind of sat back, was like, oh, you didn't know really how to react. With this, every time that I've seen in a theater, when the title card comes up at the end, people kind of go, woof, like they're trying to wrap their brains a little bit around, well, what comes next and what happens to these people or what happens to the entity. If we can leave them kind of guessing, or even just kind of being a little breathless at the end, then again, I think that we've accomplished what we were trying to do. And if we can get a couple messages in where people can say like, I felt really challenged by that, or I felt like seen and heard and identified by that, then all the better.
Yeah. And I also want to say that, I've been an actress for almost 40 years, and mostly in horror and some other stuff. But, when we premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival, we had some interviews there, and, we had one interview with one guy, and I just kind of came to the realization that, Lovecraft is my legacy. And when Stuart passed away and then I read the script, I was like, I have to do this movie, because I moved into producing, and, I'm interested in a lot of different things, but I felt like I had to make this because it was a movie that Stuart wanted to make and he couldn't. And I do love that story as well. And I just felt like if anybody was going to do it, it was going to have to be me. I was going to have to make it happen. And it was important for me to make it happen for,
And let it be known also, this was at the time when Barbara was not going to be in the film, because once we swap the genders at one point when we were developing the script. I had asked, Barbara, would you be, interested in being this? She's like, no, I just want to produce it. The fact that
let's
she
be
wasn't.
honest, but let's be honest about it. Yeah, I want to be really honest, because I really felt that we needed a minority in my role.
Of course, that's how it was written.
We wrote a version of the script with that.
We did.
Mm-hmm.
Heather Graham, greenlit the movie for us. Obviously it was Lovecraft and it was me, and so there was something there. But to get the money for movies, you have to have a lot of different things where the money people go, okay, and they were like, Lovecraft, okay, Barbara, okay, Joe Lynch, oh, okay, Dennis, yeah, Heather Graham, you got the money. And then we're like, she's so blonde, and so am I. So you know what? Let's write this, for somebody who's a minority. So, we were actually looking for somebody who was Black to play my role. But then we thought, I don't know, I'm Lovecraft. So, maybe we should put me in the role. Then we thought, well, maybe we should make Judah Lewis's character Black. Let's do that. And then we're like, but that brings another layer into it that I don't think we want to deal with. That was like, I don't know, there was just something about that we went, that's another thing. And so most everybody in the movie ended up being white, but we didn't want that necessarily.
It was not for lack of trying, but at the same time, the fact that we were even having those conversations, that's what made it exciting. That's what, where we were even delving into, well, what are the scenarios here if we try this, this gender or this ethnicity? There were so many discussions after that. It wasn't just, get me whoever's on the list. At the end of the day, though, and I will say this before I have to go, I will say that any of the parts that we cast in this film, it was due to the best actor for the part. Every single character, we were blessed. And the fact that, because I had worked with Barbara on Creepshow 2 years ago, and just watching her work was so exciting. So the opportunity to kind of present this again with Barbara being Dr. Derby, with Dr. Daniel Upton. Once we had that idea and made that go, it made us all really excited because we knew what Barbara was going to bring, and that was going to be 200% of all of it.
Yeah, and then I felt like I couldn't imagine a time, sorry, Dennis, I couldn't imagine a time when I wasn't going to play the part. Then by the time I did, I was like, yeah,
when you watch the movie, you can't imagine anybody else in the role.
I agree.
She's just great. Just great.
All right. Unfortunately, I do have to go. I'm so sorry. If you guys want anything else, just let me know. I'm more than happy to, do a follow-up, but I gotta go. So good luck, everybody.
All right.
Good to see you, Joe. Great to see you.
See you, everybody. Mwah. I love you.
Bye. I mean, all the performers were great. I mean, there was that one orderly with the mustache, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
That guy.
All right. He was
phoned it in.
And Jonah Ray Rodriguez playing the orderlies. And it's funny enough, there was one guy who plays when I'm leaning over Judah's body when he's crawling, and Beth is inside of him and he's dying, and I'm like, Beth, we're trying to revive him and whatever. There was a younger actor there, and we had originally cast him as the orderly, but then he showed up, and it was like over Zoom. He did an audition and we really liked him, but then he showed up and he was, a smaller person. And then Joe Lynch was going to play the other orderly, and he was up here. We thought visually, Joe Lynch was like, no, we have to have, and Jonah was going to play a different part. Anyway, we mixed everything up. So what we wanted was Heather Graham's head and then the two orderlies. So then we gave the other kid the other role, and so it worked out. But yeah, those are fun.
Yeah. The writer knows nothing about this. Afterwards, I just watch it and I go, that was great. Oh, that guy, he was good too. He was really good.
Yeah. And then we did cast this guy, Hunter Womack, who I love so much, as Mace Jr. He's Mace's son, and he just killed it in the audition. He was such a good actor. We had so much fun with him on set, and it's just, casting is so important It's unbelievably important. And, for the money people, they're like, Heather Graham. Okay. I hope she's going to be good in the part. And she was. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes you need, a name, notoriety. It just helps with marketing and everything else. So thank God, she did such a great job and she was completely on board. And actually, when we offered her the role, she said, "This is one of the best roles I've been offered in a long time."
Oh,
Like
great.
years. And there was a point where we offered it to her, and then we hit a pause, like you do when you're trying to put a movie together with the financing, whatever. And we just needed more money to make the movie, basically. So we had to talk our financiers into giving us more money. So we paused, and then I think like a month or 6 weeks later, her manager came back and said, "What is going on with this movie? Heather really wants to do this role. Come on, what's going on?" And we were like, "Shit, we got to get this going," So there was a period of like 2 months where we were like, if we don't have enough money to make the movie, we can't make the movie. So we got more money anyway. It just took some finagling.
I'm so grateful that that we reconnected. I'm
Right?
sad as can be that it was under the circumstances that it
Oh,
was. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, but we reconnected during a bunch of Zoom memorials for Stewart. And and when I sent you the script, Barbara, it was like it wasn't even it was funny. I didn't say, "Oh, gee," as I often do when you send a script to a producer. I hope she's going to like it. I hope this gets made. It was like, I want you to see this. I mean, this is an extension of what you're going to understand. This is an extension of what we did for decades. And
you worked on it
I
for
knew you
so
would
long.
understand it and appreciate it.
I know. I mean, you worked on it for so long, and I heard that you had it set up, a few different times, and people optioned it a few different times, and then it just didn't happen. And you admittedly said one of the reasons it didn't happen was because everybody was afraid there was too much sex in it. And we also, okay, so this is interesting because, I mean, when you sent me the script, I said to you, we're going to send this to financiers. We need to dial down the descriptions of the sex a little bit.
The descriptions, yeah.
It's going to be off-putting.
Yeah.
I said that. I was the only person who said that.
You did.
Everyone's like, "It's fine, send it out." I'm like, no. I'm a woman, and I'm going to read, if a woman's going to read the script and go, "I got to do this, I got to do that," it has to be under their control. So whoever wants to do it, and it has to be as far as they're going to want to go or not. You need to dial down the descriptions of it because it's off-putting to people. So we did that a little.
Now I dialed it down, and then Joe turned it back up to 11.
Well, when we made the movie. But the interesting thing about the movie to me is that I do think the movie is about so much more than the sex. But
oh yeah, sure.
the reviews, people grab onto that, and there isn't even that much nudity in the movie. I mean, it's very sensual, and it is like you're saying, Dennis, from the mind and how you're feeling and you're yearning, and there's so much more going on, and I think it's pretty tame compared to everything I see on television, and Game of Thrones.
Actually, yeah.
What?
Actually, you're right. You're absolutely
it
right.
is, but people talk about it in, they really glom onto the sexuality and, people having sex in the movie. I just think it's pretty tame to me, but what do I know? I was in reality.
Yeah, I was going to say it's one of the things that always got asked of us because we made Lovecraft because we made Lovecraft adaptations. And it's, where's the sex in Lovecraft? Come on, you guys, what are you doing? You're just putting this in there. Read Lovecraft. Read it carefully. You don't have to deconstruct Lovecraft to see where the sexuality is, especially in this particular story and Thing on the Doorstep.
Absolutely.
It's bubbling under the surface almost everywhere. It's when you're worried about when one of your actual fears, one of your profoundest fears is what you could turn into, is what your genetic makeup is, what actually what is it, not who is it, but
Yeah.
what is it that actually made love to my great great grandfather that's going to come out of me, come out of it's going to, turn me into whatever I'm going to spend the rest of my life as, with it, half human, inhuman, or proto-human, or whatever. If that's your fear, then what you're afraid of is sex. Is this important act that necessarily happened in the most blatant way. And all we do is bring that forward, and we only bring it forward a little bit because it's there in all the stories.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's there in our culture too. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
different. Like you know, I mean, um, I know people that are trans, and I talk to them about, being born in a body that they feel like they weren't supposed to be born into, and that's really real for them. And and it's only been in the recent years that they've been able to freely express that and talk about that. And they're still, in some circles they're not able to, and it's it's a deep, deep subject, really.
And we've been talking about, conversion therapy and everything. And like, this is a situation where somebody could just come in and, swoop up everything you are by taking over your identity, your whole
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, it's a primal fear. It's a primal, it's a absolute primal fear of, we're uncertain about our own identities, at least when we're teenagers, but some of that uncertainty sticks with us for our entire lives. Whereas, sometimes who you are in a dream, for example, can be very troubling to who you are when you wake up in the morning. So that's something we all carry around with us, and it made Lovecraft crazy. It made him very, very upset. It upset him profoundly, but the important thing about Lovecraft is how brave he was. He would, okay, I'm just going to put it in the story. If that's what I fear so much, I'm going to tell everybody. I'm going to show everybody. I'm going to put it in my fiction.
What I think that you and Stuart were able to do, though, is like you created more of a narrative for the story, because I feel like everybody knows, Lovecraft is so much more atmospheric, and the feeling and the tone is really there, but you quelled it into a narrative that was, it's just easy to grab onto, and it's a good foundation for a film too.
Thank you. I mean, I learned that very much from Stuart. Stuart was the storyteller. I was the flesher outer. I was the dialogue guy. I was the character bits. I was the, add this flourish and that flourish. But Stuart was a born storyteller. And his theater, the Organic Theater back in Chicago, was a story thing. That's a Chicago tradition story theater. And it's what Stuart grew up with. It's what he loved. It's what his theater always did. And it's what his movies do. It was about storytelling. And one of the things I love about Suitable Flesh is how the story opens up at the end. You think you've told the story, and then the story opens up at the end for you again.
Well, let's just say this. So Jonathan Schack, when we were on the set, I love Jonathan Schack. I had met him before, but I didn't know him. I didn't really know him until we worked together, and he is just a love and so thoughtful. And he's like, in this end scene, Barbie, you should really go for me and like kiss me and like grab onto me. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I see that. And he was really pushing for that. And we didn't shoot anything like that because I mean, the way you wrote it, Dennis, was that you didn't know that the entity was inside of her until the last moment. And I liked that. And I wanted to toy with that. And also I thought if we were lucky enough to do a Suitable Flesh 2, I could come back, as that entity. And we have talked about it. And you did write an outline for it, which I love.
We'll talk.
We'll talk. We'll see. But I, you know, it would have pushed it into the territory of like over the top, over the top, over the top, and then over the top again. I mean, we could have done that. We could have done that. But I really like the ending that we have. What do you think?
But it's almost there in your performance when you give him that little peck. It's like you almost, you know, you feel like you're right on the edge of these two people. You know, I mean, it is. There's so much subtext in that. It's your performance.
And he's questioning it at the moment. But the other thing that was in my mind for the button on the movie was that now the entity is going to be a little bit better about hiding who they are, so that they'll be able to live on. Like, how long was the entity in Ephraim?
Oh, almost till death, which was terrible.
When did the entity go into him? Maybe when he was 20 or 30 or whatever, and lived in him. And it was only when he was dying that he said, oh my God, I got to find another body. So, you know, it's like the entity was testing out the boy, and then Heather Graham's character. And then when it got to me, and I think I had talked to you and Joe about this. I don't know if it really came through in the performance. I'm not sure if it was really there in the script, but it was something that I thought about, that I tried to layer in, just, you know, in thinking about it. And sometimes you think about things, layer in and they come through, but I was thinking, why would the entity end up in me? What is it about my character that, you know, she never felt like she measured up enough to Heather Graham's character, to Beth? Like, we were colleagues, and maybe I was her, you know, professor at one time, because she's like 10 years younger than me. And then she surpassed me because she wrote books. And, you know, we did talk about this, because I worked at the insane asylum, you know, and she had the fancy office and worked with, you know, people that were potentially, you know, rehabilitative, you know, had more rehabilitative possibilities. Like, I worked with people that didn't. So, you know, for me, and I didn't have a husband, and, you know, I was kind of on my own. And so it was safe for the entity to end up in me. And I would welcome that, because maybe my life wasn't as glamorous as, you know, Dr. Derby's was.
Yeah, no, it made, you know, the balance, writing the script and finding the motives, and also the excitement of the entity, of the mental entity, of everybody's mental entity, ending up in some other physical framework.
Right.
It was terrifying on the one hand and exhilarating on the other for the characters. And it, you know, if you played with that and you followed it and you let it go, it was almost like the entity was going to go where it was going to go. You know, it almost, you know, you know, there were dozens of ways to tell this story, but the entities, you know, I always say that, your character is working when the character tells you what it wants to say. Well, the entity was telling me who it wanted to be. And it worked out great, I thought.
And one of the things we talked about in the performance was that initially we thought, well, let's copy, you know, Bruce's you know, mannerisms as Ephraim. Let's like all copy him. Let's all be the entity and copy him. And then we went, no, because if, like, in acting, you say, if I am this character in this situation, I would do this. So now we were saying, if I was the entity in this situation, my character would do this. So, you know, Judah Lewis's character was like a little bit, you know, snarky, and, you know, really liked this Saxo, obviously, but was really snarky and sort of mean. And then, you know, Heather, when it was in Dr. Derby, she was having fun.
Yeah,
you know, with her character.
It liberated her. Yeah.
Liberated her. And then when it was in me, for a very brief time, at the end, it was like settled. This is a place that the entity can rest for a little bit, you know, and feel safe in this body, because the entity can protect themselves in this body. So we all decided we're going to throw that out. We actually had Bruce record all of our lines, and And you know, I listened to how Bruce was going to do my last. I'm like, like you're saying, Dennis, it's like the character has to tell me what to do. It didn't feel right. Didn't feel right. I don't think it felt right for any of us. And then we were worried. Oh my God, if we don't all act the same, is it going to work? Is it going to work? We didn't know. We had the little tells of, you know, the cigarette and, you know, there's a couple little things, but, you know, so that was enough to get us through. And it ultimately, I feel like it worked better.
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
I agree. I totally agree. I totally agree. And it's Stewart always liked challenging an audience.
Mhm.
This film challenge, it's a challenge to follow that entity through the various changes. And audiences are usually Stewart always said the audience is way ahead of you, Dennis. Don't worry about, you know, you have to catch up to the audience. Don't worry
Right.
about the audience catching up to you.
Yeah, I
And
think this works better. And we, you know, we all know a few body swap movies, and you know, one of the ones we kept going back to was Face Off. And when those guys changed, I mean, they were distinctly that entity, you know. And then that's why I think ours is a little bit different, because the entity is different in whoever body it's going into. And I think that's an important aspect. I'm not sure reviewers have really talked about that enough, but maybe they will as the film, as time goes on and people talk about the film more, you know, maybe that'll come out more. But it's certainly something that I'm really proud of and that I want to highlight for all of us. Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
great.
Your performances were incredible, and one of the things I appreciated that was that it wasn't just a cast of like gorgeous 20-somethings. You know, a whole range of, you know, Judah Lewis is a beautiful like 20-something, and then, you know, you and Heather Graham kind of in the middle, and then Bruce Davidson being like the old example, and you know, Heather Graham and Jonathan being like age appropriate for each other. And that's something that we don't see very often. Like our generation of seeing a couple that's our age that has a relationship on screen that way, where they're kind of real, like you're really looking at the, like, it looks like they have a perfect life, but then they, you know, she's keeping things from him, and then he's like, oh, I'm not enough, and then they're like having nasty ass sex on their couch, and she's like strangling him. Like, it's just great to see all of that.
And that's kind of enough for him to get over whatever he feels about the affair, right?
Yeah, they're right.
Yeah. Originally, he was kind of written as more, you know, a dumpy kind of husband, and so, you know,
once it was Jonathan, wow.
Well, it wasn't, you know, but then, to be honest with you, it evolved because we wanted, you know, we wanted to take care of Heather as much as possible in this role, and I think she'll say she had a really good time on the movie, and she felt taken care of, and we wanted to make sure that she had somebody playing her husband who she felt comfortable with. And so we asked her, you know, we threw out a few names, and, you know, Jonathan was one of them, and there was a couple of other people. And Joe knew Jonathan and had worked with him before. And we were like, okay, Jonathan's not the person we're visualizing for this part at all, but let's go there. Let's go there and let's see how this is going to evolve. And then it evolved into making them, you know, not having, you know, he is the husband that doesn't really have the career that she has, and he's kind of like, you know, maybe lost a little bit in his career. That was just something at the dinner, you know, when they were having dinner with the fish in the beginning of the movie that we kind of looked at. But we also wanted to make, when we had Jonathan, we also wanted to make them a couple that had a decent relationship. I mean, their relationship was good and fine, and then we went, well, let's expand on that and make Jonathan into, you know, and this is very simplistic terms, but, you know, you talk about the bimbo wife in a movie, you know, he was like the himbo husband, you know, so gorgeous and good looking and with his shirt off, and, you know, and then why wouldn't you want that? Well, you know, it's because an entity has gotten into my body, and, you know, that's why I, you know,
very confused.
Going into, you know, an entity is trying, you know, is attracting me, and so I'm attracted to that entity. I'm not necessarily attracted to Judah Lewis. I'm attracted to the entity.
Exactly right.
And then where does that take us? So it took us on a ride, you know, and it really was who the players were in the movie really informed a lot of what also the movie was about, you know, and it was another layer on what Dennis's beautiful script that he had also written. And then, you know, we just kept adding things as different people were added. It was, you know,
the performances are wonderful. It's been the, you know, people ask me about my career, and I tell them all you need to be is extremely lucky. I mean, you know, you had to grow up with Stuart Gordon. You had to have these terrific actors perform your scripts. You know, I'm not going to tell you how many ad libs I get to take. I mean, I get to take credit for. You know, I mean, it's, you know, yeah, it's so gratifying that, you know, that and it absolutely came true in this film. You know, it absolutely, you know, for it to happen again after, you know, a decade.
So many years.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say this.
Wonderful.
You have to have the foundation of a good script to be able to come up with ad libs and to be able to come up with things that are memorable. I've been in a lot of movies and some are not very good. And there's nothing magical that happens on a set when you don't have the foundation of a good script. It is impossible. You can't come up with gold when you have cotton. I mean, you know, you have to have a foundation of something that is really works and everybody feels really good about and comfortable to find those other moments. It is impossible if you don't have a good script. You can't make a bad script good. You can't act well in a bad script. So you've always given me amazing scripts, amazing parts.
You've always done an amazing job with them too. I mean, it's thank you. And thank you and thank you.
Yeah.
You know, it was a joy to work together. You know, so I never got to be on the set.
Yeah.
So I never saw that, you know, that happen, but it always felt so, you know, a lot of writers sit back and go, whoa, I didn't write that, or that's not the way I saw that scene, or, you know, and I would sit back and I go, whoa, that's not the way I wrote that. That's better. You know, whoa, that's not the way I thought that, you know, I thought that scene should go, but boy, that works really well. You know, but you're right, Barbara, you have to be able to find it. You have to be able to mine it. It has to be ore that's in the script to begin with. You have to be able to find it. And I'm going to go back and give that credit to Lovecraft. You know, Lovecraft is where a lot of that, you know, a lot of that good stuff is there in the original, is there in the original literature. And it's been a joy to be the conduit between that genius and all the genius that made the movies.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about things when you're talking about the script and like things that get changed over time. So you had written this script back when Stuart was filming Dagon in Spain.
Yeah, when he was filming Dagon.
And then all the way up to, you know, 2020, 2021, 2022, with actually making the film. I just rewatched the film last night so that I would have these things in mind. But I just, every time I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now, between the screener and seeing it with the audience at the festival. And every time I catch something new in terms of like, there's so many Easter eggs in there from all of your other films.
Right.
So
well, that's partly that's Joe. Partly that's
okay.
Joe is.
Those were baked into the script, or if those had been kind of layered on top of it.
Couple of them were baked into the script, but you know, a number of there are visual, you know, there are visual references, you know, left, right, and center in that film, and you know, and that can be distracting. It's not. It's the way, you know, Joe makes them work as they have story value. Joe makes them work to tell the tale. You know, Joe did a great job. You know, now that he's not here, let me say that he did a really good job. He really has the chops. He really has, you know, he said he, you know, I believe I'm quoting him from earlier in this discussion when he said he's loved film from the time he was a kid. Well, he's learned from film from the time. There is nothing you can do with a camera and an imagination that Joe doesn't have in his quiver. And he doesn't use it all in this film, but he uses plenty, and it works. It works great. He did a terrific
The
job.
camera moves, and the spinning camera, and just the irises.
Irises, split screen. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Even the look of the sanitarium and all.
What? Yeah. Elizabeth Derby's life is spiraling out of control. So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing without a reason. But boy, it's fun. And there's jazz in that. There's fun in that. There's it's
a showman. Joe is a showman, like Stewart was a showman. Joe is a showman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think when you say that you see something, that's very high praise. To say that you see something in the film, there's something different every time. When I was in Mobile, when we did the festival in Mobile, you guys very kindly showed Reanimator. I see things in Reanimator still that I hadn't seen before.
Really?
I mean, there's something, there's a little bit of something in in this performance or that performance, or the lighting here, or the camera movement there that I never noticed before. And it's just, and it all works. That was a charmed film. And you usually get to make one of those a lifetime. Stewart made, what, a half a dozen, 10?
Yeah. His first one was like, geez,
yeah.
I mean, your first one out of the gate, you guys.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I was just along for the ride. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's you. Yeah. Everybody was, everybody in that film. And it's carried through to the other films. Yeah. There are very fresh performances. I think, Barbara, about your performance in, after Reanimator, Stewart was adamant. The first thing he said when we're doing From Beyond is, Barbara, this is going to be Barbara's movie. Barbara, it's going to be Barbara's story. Barbara's going to be the, it's going to be her arc. It's going to be her story arc.
But they didn't want me. The producers didn't want me because they said I was too young.
That's why I put in Girl Genius. That's why I had Carolyn call you the girl.
Thank you. Because Stewart was adamant. Yeah, he was like, no, it's going to be Barbara. And they were like, no, let's just get somebody else. And he was like, no, it's going to be Barbara.
Yeah. No, and it worked like a charm. And those
putting that in, that helped Girl Genius, because then I was the younger, genius.
And and that role couldn't have been more different from the role in Castle Freak, which has an entirely different tenor to it.
Yeah.
And then the role, the work by everybody in Suitable Flesh was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm very proud of all of us.
Yeah. Well, I had a great time watching.
This is not the first film you've been in where you've body swapped with someone, though, because in The Evil Clergyman, you end up as the evil clergyman.
I love that. And I actually did have Jeffrey Combs say all my lines to me, and then as that character, because that's not really Jeffrey Combs, it's that character of the evil clergyman. I'm like, Jeffrey, how would you say these lines? And he said them for me, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do that. I'm just gonna do what you and yeah, that's right. That was like a precursor to Suitable Flesh, I guess.
That worked in that film in a different way from the way you say it would have worked in this film. There's the working with these actors, and it was very much like working with Stewart, is there was no limit on the imagination. Keep imagining this, and then keep reimagining this, and let's find where the imagination comes up with the best thing you can do. It was like, I was just talking to somebody, a lighting designer who worked with Stewart in the theater. And he would say, and then we'll do this and that and the other thing. And what could we possibly do here that would be spectacular? And then the designers would come up with something and they would go, okay, let's do that. And then he said, I would say to Stuart, if we do that here, that's gonna, that's the money shot. That's gonna, we're not going to be able to top that. He said, don't worry about it. We'll find it in the next scene. Stuart was, just, go for it every scene. And, it was, and you guys were so game, you went there, every
I don't
time.
have any issues about going anywhere with Stuart. I was like, okay, yeah, yeah.
Trust. How can you not trust Stuart Gordon though? I mean,
Well, we didn't know. I mean, you knew, but
he was my college roommate. I knew exactly how far to trust Stuart.
But I didn't know.
Really.
I didn't with Reanimator. I didn't know. I'm like, I got a part in a movie. I was so excited. I was a young person, and I didn't know to trust him or not trust him or whatever. I mean, he was the director. I just did what he told me to do. And, I think everybody just committed to what the roles were and what the script was. And, it wasn't until afterwards when the reviews started coming out that I went, oh, we made a good movie. But I also, and because I didn't know, I didn't have any taste back then, really. My background is, I'm a carny. My dad and, our whole family traveled with the carnivals and throughout, the United States when I was little. And so I was exposed to a lot of really interesting people. And nothing fazed me really, even at that age. So when I read the script, I wasn't like afraid of the material or anything. Nothing scared me. I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. Okay.
That you had to be that to work with Stuart, because Stuart was fearless. I mean, you talk about the films being dangerous, that Joe's films are dangerous and Stuart's films are dangerous. They're also dangerous to the filmmakers. I mean, talk to anybody who's worked in one of Stuart, talk to anybody who worked with him in the theater. They'll tell you how dangerous it was to work with Stuart. How, you occasionally took your, your health, if not your life, in your hands, doing what he wanted you to do to make a scene work. And everybody was fearless. Everybody he's always worked with has been, that means the commitment to the role, to the project, to the story that's being told is so profound that, if it's a good story, it will be exceedingly well told.
Yeah. Okay, I gotta go soon. So
I gotta go too. Notice it's getting dark. It just got dark around.
We've been talking for about an hour. I think it's time to sort of round it up. But what a wonderful story this all is, and it's we're so thankful to Barbara. It's interesting to have started in Reanimator like that and kind of built this legacy, and now you're making this happen, and is so responsible for Suitable Flesh coming to screen, and to be able to assemble, to be able to work, to work with Dennis, with the script that never got made, and to be able to find a wonderful director in Joe Lynch and all the amazing performers. I mean, this really is a wonderful ensemble. We just love it to death. We think Stuart would have loved it.
Yeah.
We're sure Lovecraft would have hated it, probably, but he was quite a curmudgeon.
Yeah. Well, he would have hated it for all the right reasons, though.
Yes.
Can I ask you guys a question? Do we know who Lovecraft's ancestors are now? Like who is surviving? Who are the people? Like,
I love
know any of those people?
There's an estate, but the estate is, I believe, not related to Lovecraft himself, but to Barlow. So they're sort of a literary estate. But yeah, I don't believe he's got any surviving.
Yeah, I don't think I think that branch of the family got cut off with him.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Although there's something profoundly creepy about that too. I mean, he's he has left no progenitors except for, let's see, us.
Yeah,
All of us who are his.
I'm a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, so are you.
That's very creepy to think of, that we're all Lovecraft's children.
Yeah.
In the way that he's the entity inhabiting our bodies.
Yes.
I gotta go.
Put forth his sport.
All right, this was fun. Thank you
This is
so
great
much.
fun. Thank you,
for-
guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
It's great to get to know you too. It's wonderful.
Thanks everybody watching. Thanks for being part of the HP Lovecraft Film Festival, and we're so happy you can all be with us.
Yeah,
And,
and if you haven't seen the Suitable Flesh yet, why not? And then
Go see it 10 times.
yeah, you can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's for rent or sale. iTunes, I think YouTube and Google Play. And then I just heard that it's going to be out on home media in early January. And then it sounds like it's coming to Shudder late January. So be on the lookout for that.
Go watch.
You can buy the Blu-ray for a Christmas present, and you'll get it by January 10th, I think.
Awesome.
You're perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.